Good morning, dear viewers. This is the Asian Economics Channel and your host, Yeldon Sarabhai. Today with me we have Annie Pforzheimer, who is a senior U.S. diplomat and expert on Afghanistan and South Asia. She served as acting Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Afghanistan, where she was closely involved in U.S. policy on Afghanistan before negotiations with the Taliban. Over a long career in the U.S. Foreign Service, she held senior postings in Turkey, Mexico, South Africa, El Salvador, with a focus on human rights, political military affairs, conflict resolution, and diplomatic strategy. She is an adjunct professor of international relations and affiliated with the Center for New American Security, and her research is widely cited for analysis on U.S. Taliban engagement, governance challenges in Afghanistan, and the evolving role of regional actors. Thank you for joining us, Annie. It's an honor to have such a distinguished guest on our channel.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Annie, if you don't mind, I'll start with the first question on the normalization trap. The U.S. has now released Americans through the Bohel I'm sorry about this, Khalilzad channel and designated Afghanistan as a sponsor for wrongful detention, and yet continues to negotiate with Mutaki. From your experience, does this pattern to punish and engage simultaneously represent a coherent policy, or is the hostage first approach quietly building normalization pathway that bypasses every benchmark in the U.S. once insisted on? That's governance, women's rights, and counterterrorism.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think at the moment, I don't see an indication that the hostage release is being viewed as a prelude to something else.
Hmm.
I think it is seen in its own right as some kind of necessary action on the part of the Taliban.
Hmm.
You could almost say that they have to release the hostages not in order to get something, but in order for things not to happen. There could be other punishments that the United States is considering if the hostages continue to be held. So that's one way of reading it, that it is a standalone issue for the US, that they have given a really clear indication with that designation, as you mentioned last month, of wrongful detention, that they have shown that they really mean to put Afghanistan in a special category under the Taliban, and that they continue to talk about it at the UN and other places, that this is seen as hostage diplomacy.
Hmm.
Um, to get that designation reversed, the Taliban have to do basically two things. They have to release all the hostages that they are considered to be holding,
Hmm.
and they have to essentially promise not to do it in the future.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
it is a meaningful designation, I think, in terms of signaling that this is where the U.S. is the most interested in seeing progress.
Okay. Before, could we elaborate on like what kind of alternatives could there be? What is the Taliban more afraid of? A U.S. response or a U.S. non-response?
I think the Taliban might actually be afraid of a repeat of the drone strike that happened in
Right.
2022,
Right.
that killed the Al Qaeda leader in Kabul. They
Right.
could be afraid of that. The indications are that one of their hostages was taken immediately after the drone strike.
Hmm.
They could also be afraid of any other kind of restrictions on humanitarian assistance,
Hmm.
further tightening of sanctions. It's really hard to say,
Hmm.
but I think that they should understand that the hostage issue is not a really fruitful one if
Hmm.
they think that this is a way to get the United States to do what you just mentioned, which is to kind of jump over any other considerations it may have
Hmm.
with respect to normalization. I think that for my reading of it, and I am no longer with the US government, it is a separate issue.
Hmm. Okay. Um, got it. And could you tell us about the Habibi case as the Taliban deny holding Mahmoud Habibi despite FBI evidence, and the Coil release showed that the uh, Khalilzad's Qatar channel can deliver individual results, but Habibi has produced nothing. In your assessment, is the Habibi case a genuine intelligence gap on the Taliban side, a deliberate retention for future leverage, or does it reveal that the Haqqani network, GDI, operates outside whatever commitments Mutaki makes to Washington, which is, so the US is negotiating with somebody who can't deliver?
I mean, I think those are all plausible. They're fascinating in a way. The poor person involved, is absolutely undeserving of what has happened to him.
Hmm.
But any of those things could be true. That
Hmm.
the Taliban genuinely doesn't have him is a real possibility.
Hmm.
I think it's fair to say, and the Pakistanis have pointed this out, and others, the Taliban really can't control what's happening inside Afghanistan.
Hmm.
They have this, complete and draconian attitude about controlling whether, a girl is showing too much of her forehead in her attire at the market. But when it comes to actual control of the territory with, as the UN has pointed out, the, dozen or so terrorist groups who are operating from inside Afghanistan, they absolutely do not have full control.
Hmm.
So I think if I had to choose one of those options, I would say it's plausible that the Taliban simply has no ability to deliver Mr. Habibi.
Hmm. Okay, so what I'm understanding is that it's a very fragmented sort of no um, governance in traditional political reading. It's just a fragmented groups of
I wouldn't actually say that. I mean, I think that the Taliban control over many aspects of, of controlling a population, of governing it, so to speak. They're actually in control of quite a lot.
right.
And any government, honestly, it's hard work to, to know every terrorist group that's inside your borders. Governments within Europe can have trouble finding every cell that's inside a major city.
Right.
I don't think it's that the Taliban doesn't have control. I think they sort of do, but they don't have 100% control.
Hmm.
And this seems to be one of the cases where they don't.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I've never been to Afghanistan, so I'm trying to imagine it as best I can, but it's difficult to call the de facto authorities um, a proper state. Um, but I guess we just have to go along with what the situation is, right?
It can very much depend on what you think a state is supposed to do. There's some definitions where it is supposed to deliver services to its people.
Right.
And the Taliban regime is a complete failure in many, many, many aspects of that.
Hmm.
That delivery of food assistance, of health care. The Taliban regime is taking money through taxes,
Hmm.
spending it on its own security, and then turning around and failing to supply food, health care, and other services to the very needy population. So it's an extractive regime. They
Hmm.
are taking resources, they are selling Afghanistan's mineral wealth out from under it,
Hmm.
but they're not providing what a state should provide,
Hmm.
right? Which is services to the citizens who live there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You mentioned selling minerals, but I'll take a note of that. But you also mentioned the role of Pakistan a bit earlier. Could we elaborate on the open war between Pakistan and Afghanistan in February that stuck military installations in Kabul and Kandahar? From your perspective, does this military escalation strengthen or collapse the U.S. hostage track, or is that totally unrelated? And does the Taliban, under military pressure, become more transactional, more willing to release Americans for concessions, or does the regime's survival instinct make the hostage files subordinate to existential fight with Pakistan?
It's that's a lot of the inner workings, and I don't have special insight as to whether the Taliban feel that somehow this is a moment to be more transactional with the US
Hmm.
as a counterweight to Pakistan.
Hmm.
It would depend on how much they're actually reading the news,
Yeah.
because at this moment,
Mm.
there isn't a lot of daylight between the US and Pakistan.
Hmm.
And so it's not that moment that we've had at various points in US-Pakistani relations where it's relatively easy to get the attention of the US and appear somehow as a counterbalance. Right now, the US has empowered Pakistan diplomatically, militarily. It is absolutely, stated that Pakistan has the right to conduct the kind of military operations it's been conducting inside Afghanistan as a measure of self-defense.
Hmm.
So it all would depend, as I say, on whether the Taliban is paying attention to the US mindset. For my way of thinking, the interest that we have in senior US circles about hostages is going to remain separate.
Hmm.
The interest that we have in empowering Pakistan at the moment, if it's going to deliver some diplomatic mitigation of the situation with Iran, very separate as well.
Yeah.
The Taliban and Pakistan relationship is going to, I think, continue to deteriorate because there is no way that the Taliban will accede to the demand to turn over leaders of the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. They're not going to give up the TTP,
Hmm.
designated a terrorist organization as Pakistan has asked them to do.
Yep.
I don't think they're going to do any of the things that Pakistan wants.
Hmm. Yeah. So I'm reading a lot of hostility between the two authorities too, but we'll just have to see how that unfolds. If you don't mind, could you just briefly mention talk about the critical minerals that you say the Taliban is saying? Uh, our channel is specifically also interested in the in investment aspects, and is it safe for the people who are buying critical minerals from the Taliban to actually conduct business with them at all?
Well, there's morally safe, and then there's physically
Yeah.
safe, and then there's legally safe.
Right.
I wouldn't give a lot on any of those accounts. There are critical minerals all over the world. To me, the concept that you have to go to a country where half the population is being held in slavery,
Hmm.
where the leaders, very clearly admit that they have zero constitutional legitimacy or any kind of faith in law that would be recognizable on an international level. I
Hmm.
mean, why on earth would anyone enter into a contract
Right.
in a country that rejects the concept of legally binding contracts and also is performing these really morally heinous acts against its own population, and also sits there, I think, a little uneasily. So that if you imagine a longer term mineral extraction commitment, 5 years, 10 years, I've got to say that the next government is going to reject anything that is signed into business under this regime.
Sure.
The next government is going to require, basic legal protections for the country.
Hmm.
And right now, as I say, as you put it, the Taliban can be seen as transactional. I don't think that they're thinking about the well-being of the population
Hmm.
nor the future of the country as they sign whatever they want,
Hmm.
without engaging in basic protections for the people.
Right.
So I don't think that entering into a mineral deal in Afghanistan is a smart idea morally. It's not a smart idea legally, and I really wouldn't set foot there physically.
Yep. Got it. Thank you very much for your opinions, Annie. It's been a pleasure talking to you and very insightful too. Hopefully we'll see more of you in the channel in the future.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.